All right. All right, so my name is Brad Rhodes, and I'm a software engineer with Mission Aviation Fellowship. We're out in Nampa. We do mostly jungle aviation. If there's a missionary or a doctor or something like that that got into or out of the deepest, darkest place in Africa, there's a pretty good chance they did that on one of our airplanes. Unfortunately, I only get to fly computers. I work in a division called Learning Technologies, which is about helping to provide distance education to people in those places that we fly to. So let's see if I can get my, there we go. So I'll start off here with just how I got into Grails. Years and years and years ago, my introduction to Java was I got to inherit a strut swan application. And that was a fairly painful thing to do. I couldn't figure out why there was getters and putters for every single stinking field. It seemed just ridiculous. And then I escaped that world, did Delphi and a bunch of other stuff for a long time. Was that?
Not much of an escape.
Oh, I love Delphi, actually. Through all that, I kind of became aware of Spring. And when I got to my current place, I had a new system to develop. I wanted it to be open source Java. I was starting to check out Spring, and I really liked all the concepts of Spring. Dependency injection, all this cool stuff. But all the XML involved to make it work just looked like a nightmare. I'm kind of a high-level guy. The tedium of configuration with XML, I just saw as a nightmare. And so I started looking. I said, okay, well, maybe there's some good case tools out there that will generate all that garbage for me. So anyway, that's how I ended up, through that research, ended up discovering Grails. So Grails is a full stack framework. It's built on top of Spring. So at the end of the day, what you really have is a Spring MVC application. Yeah, so it's built on top of Spring. It's got Hibernate in there, giving you object relational mapping. And that's kind of cool because it's actually not just object relational mapping, I should say. Well, Hibernate is. There's actually another piece in there that's kind of an abstraction on top of Hibernate called GORM. And you can swap out Hibernate for other like NoSQL databases, so like Mongo, for example. I do some CouchDB stuff. I haven't gotten it to work in Grails, but there's an old plugin to use CouchDB even. Site Mesh is a template framework. That's all right. And then most of your coding is in Groovy. Groovy's dynamic language, compiles down to Java bytecode. And it's totally compatible with Java. If you take in general, if you took a .java file, renamed it .groovy, it would run. Not the other way around though, because Java wants semicolons and stuff like that, and Groovy, you don't have to worry about that. But Groovy and Java can interact with each other very, very nicely in Grails. And then Grails has lots and lots of plugins for it that gives you functionality. In fact, Grails itself is very modularized into plugins itself. There's kind of a rub to that though, which is as some of the plugins are maintained by Spring Source, the developers of Grails in Spring. But there's a lot of community developed plugins out there too, which provides a lot of value, but they don't all necessarily keep maintained. A guy will write it because he needs it, and then he's off to another job and and abandons it. That's kind of a downside of it. But then frequently somebody else will find it, need it, and pick it back up. But you can get real excited and find, oh, that's exactly what I need, and then find out, well, it doesn't work in the version of Grails that I'm working in. So it comes with Tomcat embedded in it. So you can, once you've got Grails installed, you're good to go from a development perspective. There's also an embedded database, an in-memory database called H2. Oh, I should have brought that up a little sooner so you could see it. So that's all this high level what's in there. So as the last slide said, Grails was inspired by Ruby on Rails. It's not a port by any means. It's just inspired by it. So in terms of the concepts in there, and I'm about to run out of my knowledge of Rails. So I'll take questions, but I won't be able to answer a lot of questions about comparing Grails with Rails because I've actually never done Rails. I just know some of the concepts that came from Rails, convention over configuration, and some of the things like that inspired Grails. And the convention over configuration is huge. That's what really lets you get around a lot of the XML garbage. So like Grails knows what to do with a lot of files just based on where in the directory structure they're located. So there's a count file for configuration files. There's a controllers folder. You got a .groovy file in there. Grails knows that it's a controller. Similar with there's a domain folder. Anything in there, Grails knows is a domain. Similar for services, the views, etc. There's really nice internationalization support in Grails. I don't know if you've ever tried to write a tag library in regular Java, but at least back in years and years and years ago when I had to do that, it was a little painful to do. Grails makes developing tag libraries really, really easy. So besides those main folders, there's also a source folder. You can drop in other Groovy files or Java sources, and then just use it as a library. If you have jar files, there's a live directory you can throw them into to use them. There's a test folder for unit and integration tests. And then I've got dependency injection kind of in italics there to kind of separate it out from the other things that are kind of all folder structures. Dependency injection is built in really easily. If you have a service that you want to use in a controller, all you do is say, if the controller's service's name is capital My, capital S server, then in your controller you just say def small m my capital server. So you just throw so you put def in the name of the server, and it's there. No XML to mess around with to do that. And that's all I've got slide-wise. Just wanted to start with just a little introduction, and then we'll get into a little code. My plan here is to do develop a very, very simple contact management application. Just a couple of domains and a couple of screens here. And we'll look at how, what gets generated here. And then I've got an idea for an open source app that if we want to keep going after we get done with the first little sample, we can start talking about that and developing that a little bit. Just thank you. So we'll just see how it goes, how time goes, and so forth. Okay. All right. So let's see where I'm at here. Okay. Oh, one other note about the history of Grails. It's evolved quite a bit over time. And there's been a number of breaking changes along the way. But they've always been worth it. The development team in Grails has been really good. The most recent version of Grails is all Rust based. You'll see some scaffolding here. The scaffolding generates Rust controllers and so forth for you, which is kind of nice. All right. So to get started, you can say Grails. Let me just hit enter there, and we should see the. Oh, that'll take us into the interactive mode, which I didn't want actually yet. All right, Grails Create App, Contact Manager. Conman. You see here it says environment set to development. That's another nice feature is development environment is default, but there's like in the data source definition, you can specify different data sources for production, test, development, and you can have as many environments as you want. Those are just kind of the defaults. Okay. All right, so now we've got our conman, and here's the directory structure. If you're looking at other Grails applications, a useful thing to look at is the applications.properties, and in particular, it shows you what version of Grails that it's using. That becomes important sometimes. All right, so now we'll go into Grails. Okay, so we're now in the interactive mode, and now we can say create, and if we get tab, we get tab completion. We can see what all the commands are. This is really slow. So we'll say create domain class. We'll call it org.boise Java users group .test.contact. Okay, so now let's go in and look at that. Whoops. Most of the interesting files are under this Grails app. And in here you see the directory structure I was talking about in the slides, conf, controllers, domain, so on and so forth. We'll look into the domain.
I've done a little Rails. They mean by the domain what Rails At least used to call model, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Domain is the model, and
It's
the
the
model,
model.
and the model view controller. Yeah. Okay. So there's our contact.groovy file that was generated for us. Okay, and we'll put in a string, first name, put another string, what else? You probably want an email, maybe. Okay, and then those are our fields, and now we can specify some constraints on our fields. So let's say name, we want to make sure it's defined, so we'll just say blank is false. That should generate a not null for us in the database schema. Email, we also want that to be defined, and we want to specify that it is in fact an email. Yeah, let me just take a look at that, make sure it looks like we want again. Okay, that looks good. I actually want to have another editor, but another editor going. Because these commands you have to issue from this top level. All right, so now the magic. I think I got it. There we go. SH dash V dash I Grails demo dot. Right. $54.219. I don't know why it's not doing the auto completion for me. So we called our domain org dot pju dot test dot contact. Okay. So this is going to generate a view and a controller for with the taking into account the fields in our domain as well as those constraints. Okay, there was a generate all command like 2 hours ago, and for all the years I've worked in this. What am I missing? Well, I guess I'll punt and show you what I generated before, which is essentially what we're doing here. Okay. So it's essentially the same thing that we just created. In fact, I think it's exactly the same thing we created. And I ran the generate all command against that domain. And if we look at controllers, this is all generated for us. So we're specifying that this controller, everything happening in here is a transaction. We have just a bunch of predefined actions. They're called actions here. These are groovy methods. Let's see. It used to be you had to use closures, which is the syntax is the same instead of, but except right here you would have an equal sign that makes it a closure, and it's better to use methods. That's the default now. I don't know why they even still have closures, but just a detail. So when you hit a URL, the domain / contact / index, this action gets executed. Show, in other words, just show contact, create, so on and so forth. You see save here is transactional. And I'm just going to execute this guy so we can see what it looks like. By default, Tomcat runs on port 8080. You can, of course, run it on whatever port you want. You can put Apache in front of it and have that handle like all your static files. But Tomcat can do everything by itself as well. What do we call this? Rails test, I think. Oh, I was talking. Well, this is going. I was talking about the different environments. It just, if you don't specify the environment, it defaults to development. But you can say you can specify the environment. You just put the prod like in front of the command. You can also do run war, generates a war file that. What else?
Is there IDE integration?
One more time?
Is there IDE integration?
Yeah. Spring has kind of their own version called GGT or something like that. It's based on Eclipse. And they just got their tooling built into it. That you can also take your existing Eclipse and install their tools. IntelliJ works with it well. I know some people do use NetBeans with it. NetBeans used to be my IDE of choice, but when I started with Grails, the integration with NetBeans wasn't very good, and it seemed like all the other stuff out there, Clips was getting a lot more love. So but I really liked the NetBeans environment better. Okay, still cooking. So first of all, you see all these controllers, or I mean, sorry, all these plugins that are installed by default. This is just all the base stuff. So pretty much everything are plugins. And then, so here's the one we just created. You can customize the scaffolding too if you want. Oh, there's the A key. Get my fingers right.
It's a strange keyboard.
Yeah. Good grief. A.
Someone spilled like a Coke on it.
Well, let's do this. Let me show you this first. So we said that both these fields had to be defined, and we said that this one had to actually be in valid email. So if I get create, it says fill it out. So you get client side and server side validation in this, by the way. And notice we're missing the .com there. So it caught that first thing client side. We got through the client side stuff and got to the back end and so nope, that's still not a valid email. Okay, now we can look at the list of our contacts, and there I am. And if I click on me, you get back, you get a view of the data, and then click edit to make changes. And mess this up again. Shouldn't let me do this update. Okay. And I'm just going to ignore that. Okay, any questions so far?
I noticed the friendly URLs, which Rails has as well now. Is there a REST endpoint for those automatically generated? So you can access your contact model from JSON to REST.
The REST stuff is brand new with 2.33 maybe even. So I haven't gotten anywhere with it beyond just playing with what's the generated stuff. But so the idea is the scaffolding. This is probably true in other environments, but it took me a while to figure this out when I got started. The idea of the scaffolding is just to kind of give you a starting point or give you a model, and you're supposed to go in and change it. You don't get round trip. You know, if you go in and change the code and run generate again, you lose your changes. It's not round trip like that. It just gives you a good starting point. And and it's adequate for a lot of just basic admin pages.
I assume this is all CSS integrated.
I was also wondering how like compatibility with different browsers for general.
Yeah, I've never had a problem with it. Take a look at the source it's generated. So here's the CSS. And obviously you can edit that however you want. So maybe that's worth looking at. So you see that folder layouts? So this is the site mesh template. See if there's anything obvious to point out. These tag libs here, layout header, layout resources, that's where the CSS stuff comes from. This gets a little complicated, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but anyway, this is a template, all the data gets thrown into there. And then, so that was called main.gsp. And if we look at any of these, we'll look at the show to begin with. Let's see. You see right here it says layout main. So what this tells you is to use that main.gsp to get your layout, basic layout. Stuff gets thrown into it. Okay, so what time do we go to?
We've got about another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So let's do another, try and do another domain. Create domain class, org.test, what was that in a class? I should have called the other thing user in this contact. Transaction, I don't know. This is the domain class for the actual contact activity. That's what I should have called it, activity. But we'll leave it for now. Okay. Okay, so every activity we want to have associated with a contact. And we'll just say string just say what happened.
You misspelled contact on line 1.
Thanks. Come on, keyboard.
Sorry for the minefield of a keyboard. Okay.
Duct tape that Rich's monitor.
Contact.
Punishment is to use this keyboard for a week.
Yeah.
Yes. We could have contact types, whatever, in there. We'll have a date. We'll call it date created. I'm pretty sure that's the right word there. Grails has a couple of nice things built into it. It's got a field called date, another field, or I mean a field called date created and last update. And if you put those in there, Grails automatically handles giving you the creation date and the update of the record. It just you don't have to write any code to do that. And want to make sure that our contact is defined. We'll leave it at that. We can specify the maximum length, which we might want to do like this, but I don't remember for precisely what the syntax is, so we'll just leave it. Now what we want to do is we want to associate those activities with a contact so that we can, like, you know, if we delete a contact, we can delete all of its transactions, for example. So we say, I think we need static in there, has many. Okay, so what this says, if I get my syntax right, is that a contact can have many transactions, but we'll refer to, instead of referring them to as transactions, we'll refer to them as activities, because that makes more sense. So it's just a map. In key : value map is all it is. Oh, let's see. Well, we might quit here because okay, it generates there now. It's magically. It's there. See, okay, so it's org.bju.test. The one thing you still don't get is it'll handle one to many. The scaffolding will handle one to many's for you, but it doesn't give you a nice one-page, invoice-looking kind of deal. You end up with separate forms, which isn't too good. Single class parameter. What are they? I wonder if the Grails is messed up in Ubuntu, because this is not looking normal. Let's see if I can do something one at a time. That is what I call it, right?
We're about to run into our
Okay.
camera limitation.
Thanks, yeah, null pointer exception in the compiler is never good.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, we're not going to try to debug that tonight.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, thanks, guys.